Welcome to Chapter 16.4, The Age of Absolutism, Rise of Austria and Prussia. By the 17th century, the Holy Roman Empire had become a mix of several hundred small, separate states. Theoretically, the Holy Roman Emperor, who was chosen by 7 leading German princes called electors, ruled these states, but the emperor had little power over all these different princes. This power vacuum led to a series of brutal wars that were also called the 30 Years' War. It began when Ferdinand, who was the Catholic Habsburg king of Bohemia, also the brother of Charles V, wanted to suppress the Protestants and declare a royal power over the noblemen. This led to several revolts and then a widespread European war. The war was devastating to the German states. Mercenaries, or soldiers for hire, burned whole villages and destroyed crops and murdered entire villages. This led to huge amounts of famine and disease, which caused severe depopulation or a reduction in the population. It was not until 1648 that a series of treaties known as the Peace of Westphalia were established, and these treaties aspired to bring peace to Europe and also settle other international problems. While Austria was becoming a strong Catholic state, a region within the German states called Prussia emerged as the new Protestant power. The Prussian ruler, Frederick William I, came to power in 1713, and he created a new bureaucracy and placed a great emphasis on military values. In Austria, Maria Theresa became empress after her father's death in 1740. That same year, Frederick II of Prussia seized the Habsburg province of Silesia. This action sparked the 8 Years' War of the Austrian Succession, and despite tireless efforts, Maria Theresa did not succeed in forcing Frederick out of Silesia. However, she did preserve her empire and won the support of most of her people. She also strengthened the Habsburg power by reorganizing the bureaucracy and improving tax collection. At his father's insistence, Frederick II endured harsh military training at an early age, and after becoming king, he used his military education brilliantly, making Prussia a leading power. By 1750, the great European powers included Austria, Prussia, France, Britain, and Russia. These nations formed various alliances to maintain the balance of power, and often Austria and Prussia were rivals. Before the 30 Years' War, there was no unified Germany and no Austria or Prussia to speak of. They were just one among many of the German states. But after the 30 Years' War that ravaged the German states of Austria and Prussia, and these two powers began to coexist as two dominant German states. Their rulers became absolute monarchs, who ruled in Europe with no check to their power. By the 17th century, or the 1600s, the Holy Roman Empire was just a loose patch of separate states. In theory, these states were all ruled by the Holy Roman Emperor, but in reality, the emperor who was chosen by the electors had very little power, and he lacked the central authority that led to this 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War began in 1618, when King Ferdinand tried to suppress the Protestants in his territory called Bohemia, which is in modern-day Hungary. The Protestant nobles were angry, and they stormed the castle and grabbed 2 of the Catholic officials of Ferdinand's and chucked them out the window, which could have led to a very terrible and brutal death, but they happened to land on a big pile of manure, which was their great fortune but also quite embarrassing. This event became known as the Defenestration of Prague, because the capital city of Bohemia is Prague, and the word defenestration is a Latin term that means to be thrown out of the window. As both sides sought allies, the Catholic side and the Protestant side, the war began to widen into an international war within Europe. So a religious conflict changed into a political war and a war over the control of Europe. The Catholic and the Protestant rulers, instead of sticking with their religious side, would often flip-flop between different sides in order to maintain something called the balance of power, which we'll talk about later. The 30 Years' War was extremely brutal. Mercenaries were hired, and they had little regard for human life, and they burned villages and killed without mercy. This was a time when wild animals, which had not been seen since the Middle Ages, such as wolves, began to roam the streets at night, and it was a very fearful time. Severe depopulation occurred. As many as 1/3 of the people of Germany died because of this war. The Peace of Westphalia, though, ended that war in 1648, and the treaties aimed to create a general European peace was called this Treaty of Westphalia. France, though, was the obvious winner of this agreement because it gained so much territory. It gained the territory that we call Alsace-Lorraine, which is a strip of land between modern-day France and Germany, which was then fought later over in World War I and again in World War II. France also gained territory in Spain and other areas in Europe. Germany was divided into more than 360 separate states, and it would not be unified again until right before World War I. After the war's end, the Habsburgs in Austria, which is down here, wanted to create a strong unified state. But this was difficult because the land that they wanted to unify was made up of many diverse cultures and peoples. Over here you have the Magyars, and then you have German-speaking people. Up here in this area, Poland, all of these different places have different people groups. Poland's people group would be the Slavs. All these people groups had different languages and even different religions, but the dominant religion was Catholicism. And so the Austrian Empire was known to be Catholic. Charles VI, the Habsburg Emperor, died in 1740. He had no male heirs, but only one daughter named Maria Theresa, which is a very Catholic name, by the way. And this daughter was actually quite intelligent and capable, but because she was a woman, many of her the people who had helped her father rule the Austrian Empire did not want to accept her as their ruler. And the War of the Austrian Succession began when the King of Prussia, which is up here, seized an area called Silesia, which is this territory right here. But with the help of her Hungarian subjects, as well as Britain and Russia, Maria Theresa still maintained her empire. I think one of the reasons why they wanted to help her was that they were quite afraid of Prussia. Prussia was extremely militant and was becoming stronger. So Maria Theresa was actually a very good leader. Though she did not succeed in throwing Prussia out of Austria, the Austrian province of Silesia, she did win the support of her people. And she also tried to reform the tax system so that the peasants weren't paying all the taxes, but instead the noblemen and the church also helped to pay the taxes. So while Austria grew as a Catholic state, Prussia, on the other hand, was a Protestant state. And Prussia was created in the 1600s when the Hohenzollern family united their lands. One of the interesting things about the Hohenzollern family is that they used the name William and Frederick over and over and over again in different ways. So all of their kings are named either Frederick or William, Frederick I, William, Frederick, something like that. So it's going to be a little bit confusing. So don't get confused. We'll try to make it as clear as possible. All right, so Frederick William I is considered the founder of the Hohenzollern family as a united political unit, and he came to power in 1713. he gained the loyalty of the noblemen by rewarding them with positions in his military and government. He had the best military in Europe at the time. It was so well disciplined that one unit of the Prussian military could totally outdo anything that France could produce. So he stressed military values. He made a whole society that was very militaristic. And he created one of the best trained militaries in Europe. So just for an example, France, when they would be marching, let's say they were marching through a field and there was a big puddle in the middle of the field, the troops would miraculously split when the puddle came in into their marching terrain, and they would march around it. But a Prussian unit would never do that. They would march right through because their discipline was so much greater. Well, Frederick William I had a son whom they named Frederick II, after his grandfather, who was Frederick I. But Frederick II wasn't really interested in warfare, marching, and militaristic pastimes. He was more of an artist, and he was a great musician, but his father did not approve of that kind of thing, and forced him to spend hours and hours learning all the different tactics and things like that. And he was actually extremely good at military strategy. When the prince became king in 1740, he immediately used his military to grab Silesia, the area that was disputed between he and Austria. And it had, at one point, been suggested that Maria Theresa and Frederick II just get married because they were about the same age, but that wouldn't have worked out at all. They didn't like each other. He forced Europe to see Prussia as a great power, and he became known as Frederick the Great. But to maintain this balance of power that Europe was scrabbling to maintain, Europe states had to form various alliances. So in the 1700s, two basic rivalries continued to persist. The first one was between Prussia and Austria. They always never joined into an alliance together. And the other two great rivals were Britain and France. The main squabble between Britain and France was their colonies. Each of those countries wanted the other's colonies. So these two rivals sometimes resulted in worldwide conflict. For example, Britain and France fought in something called the 7 Years' War, which happened between 1756 and 1763. The Treaty of Paris ended this war, and it gave Britain most of the empire that it enjoyed for the rest of the 1700s and the 1800s.